We'd like to welcome you to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by GraniteGrok.com, New Hampshire's conservative website. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone-stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for 2 hours of news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com. GrokTALk. Okay, this is GrokTALK. We'd like to welcome you to another program. The big news, in my opinion, this week was that Sturm Ruger and Company announced that they were going to build a 220,000 square foot facility, hiring 500 to 700 jobs. Now, Sturm Ruger has a facility in New Hampshire. They're going to build it in North Carolina. And one of the reasons why they're going to build it in North Carolina is because New Hampshire is not a right-to-work state.
Yeah, I saw that, and here's the first real indication that right to work is not what the Democrats think, just a sort of a different version of voter fraud here in the state. Right to work means you get to work at the place of your choosing without having to be forced into paying union dues, without having to join the union. You just means you get to negotiate your own compensation. Democrats hated it, and unfortunately, in the last session, some Republicans agreed with them. 41
Republicans refused to override the veto in the New Hampshire House. We have, of course, posted their names at least twice.
Yes.
Just recently this week. A lot of those folks probably are not still in the legislature, but most of the leaders behind that particular wing of the Republican Party are.
The RINO wing.
The RINO wing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, who decided that they were going to be Democrat light.
Right, and as I've reported repeatedly, and I stand up for this and I stand behind it, this is one of those issues. You cannot really be for Republican values and most of the Republican platform in our state at least, and support unions. And you can't do it because the unions fund the Democrats and they fund their entire agenda, which means if you support them in their ability to do so, you are supporting every issue that Democrats support.
Yes, this is always the multi-layer kind of deal that Republicans don't seem to be very good at, which is it isn't just the issue that's plunked in front of you on the kitchen table. It's playing chess and see what the next moves are 2, 3, 4 moves down the line. Very much more like chess or Othello, if you've ever played that game. Some people call it reverse-eye, but it's a lot more complicated than checkers. And here's one case where these RINO Republicans decided we can't see past our current move.
And and I don't rate myself as seeing all that far ahead at games like chess. I maybe do 2 or 3 moves. It seems to me most of these Republicans are unable to see past their end of the nose, so much so that I'm surprised any of them have any noses left from walking into walls.
That would be a good visualization, and yes, we are starting to come back and upgrade the environment. Everybody say hi to the camera behind you.
Hi, camera.
And we'll pose if this comes out very well. Depending on how the audio gets caught, we may have to do a feed off of the board into that. That'll be another exciting technological. Okay, which wire do I use this time?
We are always trying to evolve here at GrokTALK. Skip and I spent 40 minutes looking for a phone line we could tap into this morning, and we were very unsuccessful.
Yeah, very unhappy. We thought that we would be able to get that set up so we could then call guests or have people call in. We will have to talk to the proprietor of the office space and go, which hole do we use?
Yeah, I hate it when you have to say that. We did, and we tried them all, okay, very open-minded. We did. We attempted for a good 40, 45 minutes to try and get the phone lines working.
This is beginning to sound like a Democrat discussion.
It certainly is. I'm sure that...
Especially when you talk about evolving as well.
That's true.
Well, we'll swing it back to a capitalist venue then. I've got this piece of $1,700 hardware sitting in front of me that would allow us to bring in 4 lines of folks and guests, and I'm very tired of it just sitting there, money doing nothing.
Yes, there's no ROI on that when it's collecting dust.
And yeah, there certainly is dust. And I got this other little unit here I want to start plugging back in to help our Vocal qualities sound better, and I got to wait for that to happen as well. So, yeah, not a happy camper.
While we're on guns, just for a second before we move on, because I talked about Sturm Ruger, I pulled this morning. This is Missouri governor signs gun safety course for first graders.
Yes, I like that.
Missouri schools will be encouraged to teach first graders a gun safety course sponsored by the National Rifle Association as a result of legislation signed Friday by Governor Jay Nixon, who happens to be a Democrat.
Repeat that party affiliation again?
He's a Democrat. The new law stops short of requiring schools to teach the Eddie Eagle gun safe program, but by putting it in state law, Missouri is providing one of the stronger state-sanctioned endorsements of the NRA-sponsored firearm safety course, which the group says it taught to about 1 million children annually. The legislation also requires school personnel to participate in an active shooter and intruder drill led by law enforcement officers. Both the staff and student training were proposed as mandates when the legislation was filed on December 13th, which was the day before a gunman massacred 26 people in a Connecticut elementary school, including 20 first graders. The provision about the first grade safety course was amended to make it optional during debate in the Senate. The legislation also transfers the responsibility for issuing identification cards for concealed gun permits from driver's license clerks to local sheriffs. That change was prompted by concerns that the state licensing agency procedures had infringed on people's privacy rights. Nixon noted the change in concealed carry permits, not the school gun safety programs, while announcing he was signing the legislation. Asked if he supported the NRA's gun safety course for first graders, Nixon merely noted that it was optional. Now, apparently there was a stricter bill that he was going to veto, and so they made some little adjustments, and it seems obvious that he can't prevent them from probably overriding a veto, so he signed this.
I think that's a good thing. Years and years ago, all kinds of schools used to have their own gun clubs, and they taught gun safety then. It was more of a way of life back then as well. Not necessarily around here, but certainly more out in the Midwest and western parts. Kids would often have loaded shotguns or rifles in the back of the pickup trucks or in a gun rack, and that was considered to be normal.
Well, it was no big tool, and everybody needed to know tools. And you have tools in your basement or you have tools in your shed, and you have kids, and they see the tools. You want to teach them how to use the tools safely so that in the event that they eventually need to use them or are encouraged to use them, they know how to use them properly.
Correct. I mean, let's talk about tools in high school for a moment. When I was growing up, we used all kinds of nasty, sharp and blunt instruments in woodworking shop, metalworking shop, and what have you. Things that today's schools seem to consider dangerous. How many kids today work with circular saws, drill presses, chisels, planes, and all those things with nasty blades?
In high school, my son took woodworking, but that's it. Wood shop and metal shop, really.
Yeah, it's and even at that, though, those kinds of courses have been going away. You have to go to more of a vocational technical high school in order to get access to those dangerous type tools.
Whereas I was actually at a grammar school, and it wasn't a large part of our curriculum, but it was there, and everybody's expected to know how to use them safely. Just like the high schools had ROTCs, not only, or the equivalent thereof. We had cadet forces in the UK. Not only did we have them, we had enough of them that I seem to remember the list of call signs of the radio groups of those cadet forces ran more than 500 in a nation the size of the UK.
Yeah, well,
which gives you an idea that there were actually many more than that actually running cadet forces.
Yeah, it's sort of like what liberals keep telling me. Well, times have changed, and my riposte is always, not always for the better.
Yeah, well, people haven't. You can't.
Human nature doesn't. They just think
Human nature is what it is. It's not, it's because we talk about the culture. It comes up every week, and we apologize to our listeners for kicking this dead horse constantly. But human nature is what it is. You cannot change people, at their core. I mean, society can scope. I'm going to have to edit that out now. Wait a second. Okay.
The camera's facing the wrong way, folks.
No,
the expression on his face is priceless.
Yes, it is. I have been known to do that. You will have noticed, frequent listeners.
Yes.
Human beings are pretty much the same. Left to our own devices, we are selfish, nasty, brutish people who look out for our own best interests. And if the world fell apart tomorrow, we would
continue to do the same
We would
thing.
continue to do the same thing. We would form into tiny little groups, create tribes, fight each other for resources. That's how it would be. That's how people are.
And you bring out a good point that we have to keep talking about because we seem to be losing sight of this point. The founders understood that. They understood that human nature has not really changed all that much over the thousands of years before them and in the few centuries after them. That hasn't happened either.
Somebody's breathing on their mic. Trying to figure
Sorry,
out
it's me.
Is it you?
Yeah, let me
try moving it around. Let's see how it goes.
Well, that's better.
Okay, let me adjust your mic so I can hear you, though.
Okay,
keep talking.
We probably just need to take the bass down a little bit.
All right. Okay.
No, you can adjust the equalizers.
Yeah, we'll find it. Go ahead.
Okay.
So anyways.
Back to your point, Skip.
So anyways, the founders understood that. So when they drew up the Constitution, they said the urge for power is one of the preeminent motivations for people. We will make it as hard as possible for them to do that. We hope for a modicum of people following the rules that we lay down in the Constitution, but the whole idea is to separate the powers that a government can wield into as many parts as possible so that nobody can gain an advantage. They're all set against each other, making government rather inefficient, but it also does it in such a way that it preserves and keeps whole people's individual liberties. Well, the problem is that you have to have a modicum of people in those elected offices to be able to actually see that work and abide by the rules. You brought up right to work. I'm bringing up the rule of law as one of the most important things that we're starting to see go away. I brought up a phrase with Steve as we were trying to test all of the telephone line in the studios here or the adjacent rooms. Cloward Obama, which comes from Cloward Piven, two sociologists who decided that when New York was really down and out a few decades ago, they were almost broke. They decided, well, we're Marxists. We hate capitalism. What's the best way to change the system, which is what we want to do all along? Good. We'll bankrupt New York City. We'll force more and more people onto the welfare system, bankrupt the city, and then they'll have to be forced to put in a new form of governance. That was their whole purpose. Now with Cloward Obama, I have said since the beginning of his reign, and that's what it's turning out to be, the phrase determined weakness, same kind of deal. And with the latest things coming out of Obamacare of putting off the employer mandate and no longer have to verifying your income for the individual mandate, they've set up in yet a different way to bring down the government because we can't afford this system as it is now going to start to go into effect.
Exactly. They can't afford to administer it, or rather they can't organize themselves enough to administer it, and I'll come back to organizing in a moment. So they've basically opened it up and say, we'll just let it roll without administering it. You can join it, but we're not going to check anything. And then, we're just going to keep on paying out. And Betsy McCoy is out there saying, basically the real purpose of this is A, to take the pressure off the midterms, and B, to keep on sucking those resources. It's going to cost $60 billion a year to put people on this because the payments go out, but the revenues don't come in. No matter how much we resent the Obamacare fines and taxes, the fact is it was supposed to sort of balance, and what they've done is they've massively unbalanced it in the name of temporary electoral advantage.
As I started off here, it's a case of the RINOs only seeing the first part of this, but you're looking at 2 or 3 levels up or moves away. We also see, unfortunately, in this process now, as an accumulation of other activities. And I'll throw in the latest Prop 8 at the constitutional level as well. When you have high officials no longer willing to enforce the laws to which they've sworn an oath that says we will faithfully execute the laws under the Constitution in the president's position or the attorney generals or governors at the state level, we now have gone postmodern as far as the rule of law. We have now regressed back to that time where the rule of law is now arbitrary and it is what I say it is versus the legislative process which has defined our country, defined our processes for the last few hundred years, and this is a very, very dangerous time. Obama has said, I'm not going to enforce DOMA. I'm going to make my own changes to the energy industry with the EPA without Congress and legislation. They couldn't pass cap and trade, so I'll do it on my own. We see that the California governor and attorney general decided not to defend Proposition 8 as passed by the Initiative Act of the people. This is not a good thing, folks. This is going to end badly here in the United States.
Well,
and when you one last example, based on the Trayvon Martin and what's the other gentleman's name? All of a sudden I'm blanking out. Zimmerman. You're looking at the Department of Justice ahead of the trial, sending people down to rouse the rabblers, and now you see the DOJ coming back behind saying to the police who may have to face riots, don't you dare prejudice things, don't you dare profile. So you've got the DOJ, again, another part of the Obama administration, trying to play both sides of an issue at the same time, and in what I called an anti-lynching lynching.
It's incredible because they were responsible for stirring it up. So you have to ask yourself in respect of that, did they stir it up in order to get the outcome they wished in respect to the trial, or did they stir it up just because they want to rouse the rabble because their end game is the riots?
Yes, never waste a crisis, especially if you could manufacture one.
Right. I was going to say a little more on the rule of law, actually. So Obamacare, you could say, if you were making excuses for the guy, hey, it's my law, I can do with it what I want.
Because, no, you can't.
But,
no, you can't.
No. That's one way you could look at it, but it's not the way it's supposed to be. Faithfully execute the laws, I mean, that's pretty damn clear, and he doesn't do it. I was going to say also, in respect of Congress and the federal government as a whole, you mentioned a modicum of people that were educated and that were willing to follow the rules. What happens when the majority of those that we elect don't want to follow the rules? The entire federal government goes rogue.
Absolutely.
I think we have to remember also that the entire attack on George Zimmerman is based on the premise that the death of Trayvon Martin could be used as a catalyst to overturn Castle Doctrine and Stand Your Ground laws. So, I mean, it's a very heart of this. It's an anti-gun movement, and right out of the gate, the first thing they were trying to do, and they were unsuccessful with this, less successful than they were with, say, Newtown, which, I mean, they got a bus and everything now. Right. But it's all the same movement.
Well, not only that, but I think it's also a case of, as we saw with, here we go, squirrels time, folks, off and bringing all kinds of tangents. We saw that the IRS decided not to give its imprimatur to Tea Party groups or constitutionalist groups or other non-big government type groups as a way to suppress the vote unofficially by the U.S. government, or by those who said, we make our living off of big government, how dare you attack us? And there's a lot of race baiters out there, Reverend Al Sharpton being one, and there's a few others out there. And I think having the rabble-rousing of that trial down in Sanford, Florida, with Trayvon Martin and Zimmerman, was a way to keep the Obama base riled up. And just saying, hey, we have to vote against the man, which I always thought was somewhat preposterous, because the man of the man is now Obama. He has successfully played the outsider as he has actually become the most inside guy that you can get here in the United States. Since
we're on squirrels, this has bothered me for years now. You know how they're always talking about young people, don't listen to the man, you're supposed to reject authority. You're supposed to do all these things. And yet,
my generation said this, guys.
Yeah, it's been going on for years and years and years, though. I mean, they always, young people, even today, are like, stand up to authority, blah, 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 blah. But then the government schools, through the university system, which is highly funded by the government, and therefore the government university system, for all intents and purposes, they are all connected to the people who want total tyrannical power for the federal government. And they're all like, okay, let's just follow along and repeat everything they say.
Yeah.
And it's considered to be racist to oppose big government or anything which looks like the gravy train for the race baiters, whereas the black in the street just wants to get on with life and live better than his parents.
It really comes down to, I have to admit, I am of the boomer generation, right in the middle, and I would say that we have been the worst generation for the United States ever. And I have said that for years because of that overthrow of tradition, of traditions that actually work. Not that all traditions were good; they certainly weren't.
Freedom rock, man.
Yes, or do what you want as long as you don't think it's hurting somebody else. Which again, it takes away it's living in the moment instead of playing the chess moves several down to say, okay, is there harm further down? And that seems to be what totalitarians everywhere for all time have always said. What about right now? Forget about history. Which is basically code for let's forget about all the stuff that's actually worked. We just want to replace it all and go forward. The disrespect for authority, it's basically, a lot of it was just plain undermining of the traditions and the moral foundations and the moorings of the United States. And now we think almost everybody agrees that the United States is in trouble. Well, why would you think otherwise when you see, well, we're cast adrift morally? Why shouldn't we be heading down the tubes?
Right, so about 3 squirrels ago, and you brought me right back around.
1 squirrel forward, 2 squirrels back.
Yeah, you brought me right back around to the point I was going to make. America is uniquely blessed in a number of ways, not only geographically, not only in the nature of our founding, etc., and the fact that it's founded on an idea, but because the founding generation were at a unique place in time also where we had escaped from feudalism. The Judeo-Christian belief system had spread pretty widely and was seen to be successful. They had, books and the printing press existed. There was a reasonably good appreciation and access to history, and they studied it. These were learned men. For their time, they were amongst the most learned men. They understood human nature. They understood what had not worked about feudalism. They understood what forms of government failed and how. They had studied their history, their economics. They understood what set men free and what led them to the Hobbesian Leviathan, and they attempted to restrain it.
I don't know if I can follow that with anything.
Okay.
That was awesome.
Well, I will. People of the progressive persuasion always say, well, we have to progress forward. We have to progress forward. I would counsel all of the listeners to this to always ask them, to where? To what?
Illiteracy.
Well, that
dependency.
Well, the illiteracy, I severely believe, as well as, I put up
and that's not just
video.
That's not just reading. Just a complete understanding of.
Yeah,
well,
you have to grok the information.
Exactly.
Reading the letters on
awesome.
the page.
Very good.
Very good.
From our British friend at the end of the table.
Yes, and it was obvious from the video that I had put up about Mark Dice saying, hey, we want to help Obama. Let's get rid of the Bill of Rights. And Grokster Scott had put up something similar a couple of months before that. And you see all these people just blithely signing away. Yeah, we can get rid of the Bill of Rights. We can get rid of the Bill of Rights. There's the illiteracy of not grokking what the Bill of Rights is all supposed to mean. And you look at that and you go, this is exactly according to plan. Because if you don't understand your civics, if you don't understand the founding documents and why they are there, then you can. It's like, I'm going to put myself on a limb there. When you are atheistic, you believe in nothingness. You don't believe that there's a supreme God. Well, that also means that you don't believe that your rights have been given to you by God. You're back to the Hobbesian Leviathan. The Hobbesian state says, government will give you all of your rights, and if it's government giving you your rights, it can take them away. So there's that arbitrariness, which that's the progressing forward by the progressives. We let government take care of everything, and then people wonder why everything in the world is politicized.
Indeed so. Don, sort of passing thought there.
Derailed his train of thought.
The squirrel hid in the trunk of the tree.
The tie into that with the objectivism, where people get this idea that human beings, completely now getting back to human nature, human beings can learn to behave in an organized and honest way with each other without the influence of liberty in the form of a small managed government to oversee bad behavior, basically. and just that people would be nice, that people would just engage in commerce, that they wouldn't cheat, they wouldn't lie, they wouldn't fraud, they wouldn't try to get more than their due. And that's completely alien to the concept of human nature, which is why it would never work.
Yeah,
right,
that's the fallacy of the libertarian, what I call the libertarian myth. Yes, in small groups, people can get along, but we always know that people are going to have fights every once in a while. So we do need the limited government. But also it gives lie to the progressive myth that a progressive, that what they want to go to is a totally expert, nonpartisan state can oversee a very efficient and organized society. Again, we've just seen all these scandals in
it's the same
big government. It's
on
the
both
same
sides.
thing.
It is.
It doesn't work, and it can't work. So the thought that got derailed was when you said about belief systems and atheists. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And
Yes.
these people that have no principles are falling for the idea that government can manage their lives. We also know that it's simply not possible. Hayek wrote essays which essentially proved it, as did Milton Friedman. It's not possible to gather enough information to control everything. If you don't have decentralized decision-making, meaning individual people and small groups, it simply can't work. And the whole thing grinds to a halt. You didn't have to throw sand in the gears of the Soviet Union. It happened by default.
It comes with sand. Yeah.
So the sand is there.
It's built in.
And the gears just get ground up and it gets worse and worse.
Yeah, you just look at Venezuela now that Chavez is gone, and Maduro, and then you look at Uruguay. No, not Uruguay. Where's Kirchner? Argentina.
Yeah.
And you're looking at the built-in sand there, and both of those highly socialized environments, whether they say that they are or not. Well, in Chavez's case, socialism was everything, and you're seeing the society unravel, and yet you see that the socialists here in this country say, that's all right, they just weren't the right people to implement it, which also gives rise to the question, and you are?
Yeah.
So are you saying that we have exceptional sand?
No, I'm saying that we have ordinary or less than ordinary sand, but they don't believe they.
They think they have exceptional American sand.
Yes.
That's their socialist American exceptionalism. Our sand won't grind the gears.
Yeah.
And they're wrong.
Yeah,
It's almost like saying their crap don't stink.
I was about to say the same thing. Their poop don't stink, but,
That's it, ladies and gentlemen. Here on GrokTALK, we have crap, we have poop, we have monster trucks. Okay. We have come pretty close to the end of this segment.
Good.
Things are deteriorating.
But that comes to the whole point. The ideas have been with us for a long time, but since about the last third of the 19th century, there have been attempts to create communes, to create idealized societies, small and large, and every one of them has fallen apart.
And they'll keep falling apart, and we'll keep talking about it right here on GrokTALK.
You're listening to American Conservative Nation Radio program, your one-stop network for independent conservative talk. Join forces with us as we battle the establishment political class and cut through the rhetoric like a hot knife through butter. Visit us on the web at acnation.com.
So what kind of guests do they have on GrokTALK? Gary Lambert, Ellen Cole, Kevin Bloom, Dr. Julianne Cooper, David Hurst, Don Walker, Jane Cormier, Bill O'Brien, Greg Moore, Jack Kimball, Jen Coffey, Anne-Marie Banfield, Laura Condon, Karen Testerman, John Heichel, J.R. Hull, Guy Lothrop, Ashley Pratt, George Lambert, Mark Warden, and Ed Nail. Should you be listening to GrokTALK?
Do you think our country is doing just fine?
Nope.
Do you want the cultural, financial, and political analysis that you just don't get from the mainstream media?
Hell yeah.
Then join David and Brian Terry, the Mayflower Brothers, Thursday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for an hour. That's David and Brian Terry on the Mayflower Brothers, Thursday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Only on acnation.com. See you there.
GrokTALK.
All right, we're back. Flashback, people. That's the People's Court soundtrack.
As opposed to the theme from Shaft.
As opposed to, they sound a lot alike.
I was telling
Skip before. I'm always looking for new music for bumpers and stuff because we like a little variety and we have quite a few different things going on. The music for the People's Court is over 4 minutes long, and that's a really long time to have to listen to that. Let me tell you, because I was looking for something different, and I'm looking at the way it's laid out in Audacity, and I'm going, well, that looks like it might change. No, not really. And I look at that looks like it. No, it's kind of the same. Couple instruments come and go, same thing.
Thinking of courts, how about the Court of the Crimson King? And who knows, that might be what we end up with in a few years.
That's true.
Okay, you're going to have to clue in the listeners here.
Yeah, back for those of us that are old enough, like Skip and me, there's a group called King Crimson in the heyday of 60s and 70s rock, and one of their albums was entitled At the Court of the Crimson King, and it was some pretty heavy stuff. And Crimson King would be what we might end up with if the Marxist manages to reign a little too long.
Yeah, all we have to do is just look at Russia and China and say, okay, all these great, sophisticated, the right people to impose socialism, what did they do to their own countrymen?
You have to move your mic back, Mike.
Sorry, they killed him.
Yeah, plain and simple.
All right, we have Max Abramson en route to talk to us about his little court situation, legal, and then a little bit later, Joe Mendola, did I pronounce that right? Susan may be bringing a gentleman by who is a local conservative activist. He'll be stopping in to see us. And in the last half hour, we have us.
Oh, wow.
Because we did have guests, but we had some issues, and we had to reschedule the whole day. And that happens sometimes, and that's okay.
It's not as if we have nothing to say.
That's true. I think we've proven that time and again.
Absolutely not. And by the way, this week, sitting in front of me, one of Steve's squirrels just drove by in a turbo diesel. What am I talking about? Steve wrote an excellent piece on the Chevy Volt and its demise because
the Obamamobile.
The Obamamobile, because it is, after all, pretty much an economically non-viable machine, not only in terms of its limited range and poor efficiency, and the fact that you're paying 3 times as much for what is basically a Chevy Cruze, but also the cost of the batteries, the environmental damage that the battery production and reproduction does as they age and get replaced, and the overall life cycle costs have now been estimated to be worse to the person and the environment.
And the important thing is that some of the people who are in the middle on this issue and maybe even leaning a little bit towards favoring it are beginning to notice that the womb-to-tomb costs of these vehicles is exactly what I said it was 5 years ago, and I think we all did, really. We were all thinking it, whether we were writing or not, that you're looking at this and you're going, all right, you're going to make an electric vehicle powered by coal. Okay, even if it's not powered by coal, it's going to be powered by something, which is going to require carbon costs. And now you talk about the vehicle, and you talk about the batteries, and they started talking about batteries, and I'm like, batteries, man, batteries are nasty. Everybody thinks batteries are nasty. All the lithium comes from places like Bolivia, in Chile. China has 80% of the world's graphite production. You can't build a lithium battery without graphite. So what we're really saying is, we're going to use these battery-operated cars to help us be less dependent on countries that don't like us. And yet all the materials and heavy metals that we need, which are nasty to extract to begin with, are in countries that hate us.
Yes, we've transformed ourselves from having to import oil from people who who don't love us, who hate us in the Middle East, now to more communist countries like China who own, a lot of that stuff, and they hate us too. It's like, oh, this is working out splendidly.
And what's really, really dumb about all of this is that you're going to go, okay, we have all the oil and gas we really need. I'm not a person who says we should ever really think we can be energy independent.
But we're damn close to it.
We could very well. I think it's fascist. I think that, Canada has plenty of oil. Mexico has oil. We're all in one. We don't even need to go offshore to get our oil. We can have it trucked up or piped up across a border if we don't have enough.
And we can do what's most efficient if we were ever allowed
and
to
we
build
can
refineries.
do it here, and we can. And it's cheaper. It's American jobs. It's American infrastructure. You don't build an energy economy without affecting other sectors of your economy, and then that revenue from oil companies, not from taxpayers, is recycled through the economy in secondary sales and all kinds of things. It's a great fix.
Well, look at some of the nations of the Middle East. They have the perfect version of socialism. The government makes lots of handouts to keep the peasants happy, while a few people get extremely rich. And they do so because they have their very own money tree. The tree is upside down, it's all those pipes in the ground, but essentially they've got an endless supply of royalties from the oil, which is then used to pay for all of the largesse of government.
And the terrorists.
Well, that too. But here we have the potential to have the revenues from onshore and offshore oil, gas, fracking, whatever, to really feed our economy and to help pay for the cost of government without printing it. So let me see. We stop printing dollars, which means their value stabilizes or goes up. We stop importing oil, which means the amount of dollars being shoved into the unwilling world goes down and the dollar value stabilizes or goes up. And then finally, we start selling oil and gas to the world, or maybe selling refined products back to Mexico and Canada. And all of this causes foreign exchange to go to reverse, and the value of the dollar to firm or increase. How bad is that? This sounds wonderful.
And to play to the green people, the Gaia worshippers, we are probably the most environmentally sound nation when it comes to extracting these resources. So you can either have it done here and have us benefit and have the planet be greener as a result, if that's a huge concern for you, or we can let countries like China, which are strip mining dirty coal, and India, which is strip mining dirty coal as fast as it can because their economies are growing, and making the planet nastier, if that's what you're concerned about. We can do it cleaner, better, more effectively, more cost effectively, and we can benefit as a result.
Right. And the oil production disasters and messes created in places like Nigeria, Congo, Ecuador, etc., are blamed on the greed of the Western oil companies. But how about the greed of the local people that wanted the revenues and didn't care about cutting corners to get the oil out, that didn't care if the pipelines were shoddy or the equipment leaked? And now we have environmental disasters far away from home. And as they want to blame our oil companies, but there's a lot more involved than that.
And it's very difficult to crash an oil tanker in the ocean or in a lake or a river and have the oil dump out everywhere if there is no oil tanker. If that oil's coming from inside the country and traveling through pipelines or however, in trucks, through the country, there's no tankers.
Right. I mean, we just had a tanker disaster in Canada, for example.
Was it a train derailment or something?
It was a train derailment. It was
blew up a town?
Yeah, it was really nasty.
It was nasty, yeah.
Very, very nasty. And there will probably turn out to be some negligence. I don't think that the trucks were badly constructed or anything like that. It looked like there was either a management failure with the train brakes where on the one hand they left the engine running to keep the brakes alive, and on the other hand they shut the engine down because it overheated, and then it started to roll. I mean, there was some stupidity going on there, and they got a criminal investigation. But even that, the overall record of rail shipments is very good.
That's excellent.
What the point that tends to be missed is that, if I read the numbers right, nearly 100x increase in oil shipments by rail in the last 2 or 3 years due to new discoveries in the United States in places where we don't have pipelines yet, improved extraction from the tar sands, which is getting more oil for less environmental damage, and oil coming in, I think, also from Mexico occasionally, but vast increases in the amount of oil being moved domestically. It's not just coming to ports, to refineries anymore, and because of the reluctance of the administration to allow very carefully planned, environmentally sound pipelines to be built, we have an enormous increase in the number of rail cars full of oil running around.
And rail freight is extremely, it's a good business. Freight makes a lot of money. For those of you who are interested in commuter rail and think it's a good idea, you're really wasting those rail lines. The freight rail system is a profitable system. It makes money. It makes sense. It's cost effective. It creates jobs, and it doesn't cost taxpayers anything. Again.
Now, if I was looking to capitalize on that, oops, there's that word again. If we had a good, smooth operating freight railroad system throughout New Hampshire, and we really have a few fragments of rusting lines, just possibly that might run up through one of the commuter corridors, and maybe I could run freight at night and commuters in the daytime and make extra profit. Now, that'd be a reason to have commuter rail, because it wouldn't be depending on government to prop it up.
Hey there. We have guests moving in and around. And so, yeah, we have a solution. It's a conservative solution for energy problems. And we've just been talking about it for a few minutes. And so we're going to do a little guest rotation.
Right. And let me close the loop of where I started. I said one of Steve's squirrels drove across the screen fast. What it was I saw a little advert on American Spectator for the 46 miles per gallon turbo diesel Chevy Cruze. In other words, the more efficient model, better for the planet than the Chevy Volt, which is built on the same platform and a lot cheaper. Bada bang, bada boom.
Is this Joe?
This is Joe.
Hi, Joe.
Welcome, Joe.
How you doing? Nice to meet you. I'm Steve.
You got to turn his mic on, though.
I was going to wait to do that. Okay, go ahead.
We are going to have a little bit of a shift in what we do because our first guest
is running light from the seacoast.
Yes, and of course we haven't followed our initial mantra that, if they're here, we will talk with them. If they're not here, we will talk about them.
Well, we talked about it the last time he had a problem getting here, so we want to...
Yeah, that's true. So instead, I've just brought our next guest in, Joe Mendola, and he is a conservative activist out near Grokster Susan's area. And she decided that you'd be a good guest to bring in, so I saw you just out of the corner of my eye in the doorway. So I want to say, welcome to GrokTALK.
It's good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
And this is Grokster Mike, Grokster Steve, and hopefully Susan will be in a little bit.
Hopefully.
We'll see what happens. So, anyways, instead of putting words into your mouth, I will ask the stupid question of, why are you here, other than Susan invited you and thought that you might be a good guest to talk with?
Yeah. Well, Skip, the main reason why I'm here is I'm really concerned about what's happening to this country, and particularly in terms of the message we're sending to the young people in this country, that big government is the solution to our problems. And what's going on with the Obama administration and Senator Harry Reid and Senator Jeanne Shaheen, that whole philosophy is basically what we're doing is we're taking the same size pie that we have, and because of lobbyists for different interest groups, we're just cutting them up in different ways. And I am starting to go to the colleges and talk to the young people, and the main thrust of my conversation is that if you're going to realize the American dream, we need to have the bigger pie theory and not taking the same pie and slicing it in different ways. If that continues, you will probably never pay off your student loans or achieve what my generation provided for me from my father's generation, and that was a shot at the American dream.
Well, and that's the perfect definition of the situation, the slice the pie versus grow the pie discussion. Absolutely. Of capitalism versus communism.
Yeah, because I do think that you're absolutely right, because socialism really only believes in a fixed-sized pie, and that the only way to get more is to advocate, lobby, or get your forces in power to enhance that slice of pie, which basically comes down that says socialism is nothing more than an extremely selfish state, where it is it's presented to these young skulls full of mush, as Rush Limbaugh would put it, as being, oh, we are beneficial, we're using the force of government to help people, and then it becomes an even worse situation because now you have to fight every other person to get any kind of that pie. And as the progressives have continued to argue that we have to control everything, that we should be making the decisions for the common person, everything becomes politicized, and therefore you have even more politics at the big government level. And I'm curious, how do you present that to these people? Because, face it, folks, when we were all that age, all we cared about while in college was hopefully our grades and what's going on campus to have fun at, and thinking about these big thoughts of government and which economic system and politics all the time was never a thought that really came into my mind until I got older. And I look back and go, I wish I had known then what I know now, but how many of them know now what I know now?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things that have changed in this generation of young people coming up that we didn't have to fight. Is we have a artificial unemployment rate that we talk about, and that's namely 7.6. But the real unemployment rate we need to talk about is the U6 unemployment rate, which is 13.9%. So what I'd like to convey to the young people, particularly young people on college campuses, is you're building up these. What do we have? $1 trillion in student loans out there?
More than that.
More than that. So look, folks, if you're going to be able to pay those things off and be responsible for the loans that you've taken out, the pie has got to be bigger. So the real question is, how do we make the pie bigger? Okay, and if you look at them from history is a hot button with mine. If you start with Karl Marx and the Communist Manifesto and you move it all the way up to today, tell me what socialist society succeeded over the free enterprise system? And the answer is none. I mean, you can go. I mean, our biggest nemesis, the Soviet Union, could not even make it work with all the resources they have. But let's look at Europe today. Okay, they used to be free enterprisers. You look at Southern Europe, and they're getting bailed out by the free enterprises in Germany. Germany still has a free enterprise system. And so what you're taking from the people who are creating wealth and giving it to the people who don't want to create wealth, or because of the structure, the inflexibility in their society, can't create wealth, a la Greece, and it's all a failure. The only thing that's succeeded since Karl Marx is the free enterprise system.
Okay. The average age of the people who read Granite Rock tend to be older. These are people who have gone through school. They've now had a few years, or in our cases, decades of life experience. So we tend to understand that because I think in some measure, not completely, with knowledge and experience becomes, you get wisdom. At that age, they don't see this. They've been taken care of by their parents their entire lives. And we see that then the university or the college then takes care of them. And they hear nothing but, oh, the government should be doing this, the government should be doing that. How often do they get to hear that message of, well, perhaps you should be doing this on your own? I put myself through school. I was working more hours to earn my tuition, books, and room and board money than I was putting in studying. But I still made it through, but I had to do it that way. And I graduated with no debt. The question is, how often do students hear that kind of message to say, you can, with the old school way of American exceptionalism, of hard work, persistence, and all of that stuff, make a way for yourself? And how many times do you have to acknowledge that government is making it hard for you to succeed, using examples like the founder of Home Depot, who has said multiple times, if I had to do it all over again, government has made it almost impossible for me to do that.
Yeah. Well, again, what we have to do is we have to focus on the carrot here, which is the American dream, and let's take it back. I mean, they relate to Steve Jobs, they relate to Bill Gates, they relate to Mark Cuban. I mean, these guys were in their garages. Mark Cuban and Tug Wagner, who started that online service that was bought out by Yahoo for a couple of $1 billion.
Broadcom.
They were up to their eyeballs in credit card debt. And if they had failed, nobody would have said, oh, geez, those poor guys, let's bail them out. They took all their capital, they risked it, shame on them. But because today Mark Cuban went from a 99%er to a 1%er because he grabbed onto the belief that the American dream was still alive, he's now persona non grata in our economic system. How did that happen? Bill Gates. Let's go back a generation. The Hewlett and Packard started in their garage. So what we need to do is saying, there's $1 trillion of debt out there in your student loans. That's the negative side. Let's get that behind us, but let's go for the American dream like your mom and dad did. Your mom and dad could help you through college because they grabbed onto the American dream. What is the American dream? If you work hard at something and you have a big enough desire to achieve it, through the free enterprise system in this country, you can do it.
We should go back, I think, so talking of college, to the scheme whereby not only do the parents help their kids, but there are no government subsidies, and let the colleges compete for the best kids by offering scholarships to those that are the best kids.
That's crazy talk.
There's Steve, always with the smart remark.
That'd work, too. That's why they won't do it. It'll work.
Yeah, you're right to the effect, but, Joe, you bring up the whole idea of the $1 trillion of student debt, and that reflexively makes them look to their parents? No. To the colleges who are overcharging them when they've got a gazillion people just on diversity and human factors and everything else, to the point where the administrators outweigh the number of actual faculty? No. We've now, with the nationalization of student loans, we now have yet another significant segment of the American people having to look to government for their current livelihood. We've listened to this brouhaha over the doubling of the student loan rates because Congress didn't act. And yes, this time we get to say, well, the Democrats didn't act, and that's why the rates were allowed to double. So again, we're seeing, exactly what you said. We've got a fixed pie, and Congress just screwed over the students because of this. Even though when you look at the average student, their average debt load is about $25,000, or it's a car payment, period. And if you raise that rate, they're going to pay maybe another $1,000 or so more over the life of the loan if they were to look at it as a car loan and just pay it off. But I think part of it too is American society has said the way to succeed is to go to college, get a degree. Well, when you go to an Ivy League school, and I'll never forget reading this story of a young co-ed getting her degree in early childhood education from Columbia, and now found herself with $120,000 worth of school debt. Now, my wife and I owned a daycare center for a while. I know what the finances are behind that. And who the heck let this poor lady go through an Ivy League school piling up all that debt when she's going to get, at best, an elementary, a daycare salary of $9 to $10 an hour at best, starting out? I mean, what were her parents thinking? What was her guidance counselor in high school thinking? What was her advisor at Columbia thinking for leading her down this primrose path to say, just get the degree? I mean, doesn't this show that even the nonprofit colleges are just as money hungry as the capitalists are made out to be?
Oh, absolutely. It's all about the money. It's how colleges operate. And, the government loans, the government subsidies are driving up the price. It's no surprise to economists that the cost of college is going up vastly faster than inflation. The fuel is government.
Well, so what do the students say about this? I mean, you're closer to them than what we are.
Well, actually, I'm really starting the campaign this September. I had an opportunity to speak to the college Republicans at UNH in their last meeting in April when I first got this going. Actually, I was at the Lincoln Day dinner with Steve Forbes, and I was talking to Susan and a group of us Republicans. We have a committee up in Warner called the Blackwater Republican Committee, and we were talking about that. And these young people from the next table over were listening, and one of the fellows came over who was the president of the Young Republicans. He says, "What are you talking about? What's this bigger pie thing all about?" And I said, geez, I said, I really would love to come and speak to your group. And he said, we got one more meeting. And so I showed up at UNH at the end of April. And it was interesting. I gave them the presentation that we're talking about right now. And I also gave them a couple of reading points. One was Alex de Tocqueville's Democracy in America. And there actually were a few political science majors in the room. And so when I polled them, I said, how many have read it? So one student raised his hand. I said,
only one?
Yeah, I said, you're a good man. And I said, if you remember the one quote, this is 1845. This guy was a French political scientist, a real visionary. And he basically said is when the Congress and the president realize that they can bribe the American people with the money from the public coffers, that will be the beginning of the end of democracy in America. And that was the message I was trying to explain to them. It's really somewhat about economics, but it's really about what our founding fathers gave to us, which is freedom. It's about freedom. You cannot have political freedom without economic freedom. You can't have economic freedom unless we have this engine called the free enterprise system making a bigger pie.
I mean, we were talking about that when we first started today, about why the founders created the Constitution in our form of government. And de Tocqueville talks about soft despotism in that as well, where the founders' vision, and this is something I hope that you could ask the students and maybe come back and tell us what they think about this, because very few people think about it this way. And again, with age comes some wisdom.
Hopefully.
Yeah, right. I mean, the founders wanted a very limited government at all levels.
Unless you're a progressive.
Yes, unless you're a progressive. But the founders wanted limited government because individuals were supposed to be above the government, and there was supposed to be this wide swath in the middle called civil society where people would interact and they would have their own voluntary organizations and associations that would help to take care of everybody in the middle. Limited government was supposed to be sort of the umpire. And now it's so crowded out civil society or overtaken them or bribed them. It's like how many former charities now known as social service organizations could exist without government tax money? I mean, they've basically bought their way through. Uh-oh, I hear music.
Yes, we have come to the end of our segment. Want to stick around?
Love to.
Okay, because our next guest is
because he only got a half a segment.
He got about 18 minutes, and geez, that's just not fair.
No, it's not.
So
we'll have to divide it equitably.
We'll have to enlarge in his pie.
But meanwhile, this isn't Bach, but we will be.
That's all we got to say. We'll be right back. We'll be right back.
On the Edge with Alan Peteshman, bringing you the edgiest in conservative talk. Mondays at 10 at your conservative safe space here on the AC Nation Radio Network at acnation.com. We'll see you there.
Hello, AC Nation listeners. Does this sound familiar to you? Here we go again.
Hey, John, this is your boss calling. I know you've already worked 80 hours this week, but we're gonna need you to go ahead and come in on the weekend, too, as well.
What the?
We fired some people, and we still need to get things done at the office. Okay, thanks.
I know you're busy. The kids, work, life after work. There's so much to do that there's not enough time to listen in live to your favorite programming right here on AC Nation Radio. Well, I'm here to tell you that's not exactly true. Just hop in your car, plug in your iPod, hit play, and we'll do the rest. That's right, we're on iTunes, so you can listen to AC Nation radio programming wherever you go, even on your morning commute.
You're listening to AC Nation.
To find us on iTunes, just search for AC Nation, subscribe to the podcast, upload them to your iPod, and you'll never have another boring commute.
GrokTALK.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by GraniteGrok.com, New Hampshire's conservative website. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone-stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for another 30 minutes of news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
GrokTALK.
We are back. We are GrokTALK. We'd like to remind you to visit cnht.org. The nice people who let us use their room. Give them a donation, see what they do. Start a taxpayer group in your area. Even if you're not in New Hampshire, we encourage you to do that. GraniteGrok.com is a product of GraniteGrok.com. GrokTALK is a product of GraniteGrok.com. Oh, no, I'm not done yet. Conservative blog site, blah, blah, blah.
I will
Save
say
me.
it instead. GrokTALK, a production of GraniteGrok.com, New Hampshire's leading conservative and libertarian
derailed
blog
my
site.
train of thought.
Yes, well, you got the blah blah blahs.
I got the blah, blah, blahs today.
So
It's pretty good. All the chairs are full, we want to tell you. Everybody's here.
Max, our first guest, has now arrived from the seacoast. Took a little bit to get here. It is a long ride.
It's a haul.
It is. You came in through 101.
I came up 95 to 101. I was surprised to encounter some of the worst traffic I've seen on 95. It was just a sudden, huge traffic jam.
Oh,
for no
you know
reason.
why? Well, you got the people going out to the seacoast, but you got the Loudon race going on this weekend at the track in Loudon.
Oh,
NASCAR.
I'd forgotten about that.
That would explain.
They
That
were
would
going-
explain the extra half hour it
You
took to get
can't,
here.
you
Yeah.
can't forget the NASCAR.
They're going north on 95, but then they're going west on 107, and that was packed, and that was backed up 2 lanes wide all the way
Yep,
back.
107 leads into 106, which goes right
It's
past the
also
track.
a great tourist weekend. It's beautiful out here in New Hampshire today. There doesn't appear to
Finally.
be any rain. The weather is not too hot. It's not too cold. It's Baby Bear. So there's a lot of traffic coming in from all points, east, west, and south, to go up north. And Loudon, obviously, is the biggest attraction right now, but people are heading for the lakes. There's mountains. There were trailers with boats, so
Oh,
it's
yeah.
baby bear weather. That's
It's
dangerously
baby bear
close
weather,
to
yes.
being warm and fuzzy.
it's warm and fuzzy.
Yes.
Without any taxpayer support.
So let's finish up with Joe, and then we're going to switch over to you, Max. So, do you think you're going to be able to have an impact? I mean, I really do hope so, because I do believe that the traditional American message has failed to get to the students' ears. And you look at how miserable, all I have to bring up is Jay Leno and his jaywalkings videos. And almost everybody understands what I mean by that, even if he is picking on the worst of the worst. I mean, it's horrible to see how little these people have. And with the advent of the Internet, you see all kinds of people going out and asking rather basic questions of the general populace, a lot of times the younger people. Ask them what I consider to be very basic stuff. Name the president and the vice president. Can you name 2 of the Supreme Court justices? Can you name 1 of your congressmen? Can you name 1 of your senators? What is the Bill of Rights? What is the First Amendment? Forget about the
What did
others.
Snooki name her baby?
Yeah, that you get. You'll get that answer. You'll get the pop culture, which in the long scheme means not much. I mean, that's really what the founders were hoping for. We could just concentrate on life. But you have to have that modicum of civics understanding and history. And I blame our educational system for not even wanting to include it. In fact, the goal seems to be to absolutely not teach our children their foundations.
Yeah,
absolutely. And by the way, I'm pleased to know I can't name Snooky's baby.
Who is Snooky?
Awesome answer. Woo! Yeah. Okay.
Grok
No,
Talk.
There we
bring
go.
Up, you bring up a couple of good points that are hot buttons for me, and that's, first of all, it's got to get back to the parents. This country was founded on an educational system where parents hooked up with teachers and were able to teach their children, and we have abdicated that to the NEA. In essence. And so what we need to do is we need to get vigilant and understand what is being taught to our children today, because if they don't understand where we come from, they'll have no idea how to get to where we need to go. So that's that piece. Am I hopeful? I have a daughter who is in college right now. She's going to be a sophomore this year, and we had lunch at an Olive Garden one day, and she said, Dad, I think the Democrats may have something with this idea of the 99%ers and the 1%ers. And I said, well, let's think about that a minute. I said, Jennifer Lopez started off as a 99%er. Mark Cuban, 99%er. Steve Jobs, 99%er. What they did at Lady Gaga, 99%er. Just go on and on. The only reason why they are 1%ers today, which I'd like to create 2%ers, is to bring more of those people here because of that bigger pie theory and the American dream. And a woman from across the room there, I guess, was eavesdropping, and she came over and she said, I never heard it presented that way. And so my hope is I could visit the other colleges in New Hampshire, and I hope they can say, I never heard it presented that way.
So there's a way to pitch this as how do you become a 1%er, right?
Right.
I mean, did you start out that way, which means you're part of the aristocracy? Or did you start out like the rest of us, and there was a way for you to get there from here?
Excellent point, Steve. So that brings me back to the way liberals work. America traditionally doesn't have an aristocracy, and everybody can work their way up in a meritocracy. These people that Joe mentioned either had an idea or they marketed themselves, as in Lady Gaga or J-Lo.
They had a dream.
They had a dream. They figured out how to make their act sufficiently unique and promote it sufficiently well that they became rich. The problem that we have with liberals is that their tendency is to want to cement their position as an aristocracy, as a ruling class, and pull up the ladder after themselves, whether it's the minimum wage, whether it's prevailing wage laws, whether it's non-right to work, all the things that make it harder for the poor and the minorities to get a step on the ladder. J-Lo, a minority. Mark Cuban, a minority. And these gals are fabulously wealthy, and good on them.
Or I'll pitch another person, a legal immigrant who just passed away, that I think all of us have heard of, or at least of his company, Amar Bose, who just passed away at the age of 83, who formed the Bose Corporation, and whose sons are now very heavily involved in the company. I have owned Bose equipment for years and years and years. Thankfully, I had their headphones when I used to travel a lot, cross-country all the time, and was able to arrive at my destination because of their anti-noise canceling headsets without a headache from the low-level vibrations that you get when you fly. There's another person who's basically educated themselves, was an MIT professor after graduating from MIT. Just one of those really bright bulbs that would outshine all of us here in this room, and I don't say that with any disparaging remark. He was a brilliant guy, and he took that and said, I can do stuff with this knowledge, and he created a whole industry in a lot of cases and reformed that industry of first loudspeakers, and with very innovative designs. The Bose 901 was one of the things to have back when I was at that age. Totally unlike any other speaker system that had ever been seen before, which was mostly just wooden boxes. And he made his fortune. He made, as Joe, you were saying, his American dream. I will do things differently, and it turned out that when he did, he made lots of money doing it.
Only in America.
And Joe was referring to the number of businesses earlier that were all started in garages, and I've actually seen the Hewlett-Packard garage. Fascinating place.
Yeah. I'm actually building a garage so I can do that.
So who's your sidekick going to be?
I don't know yet. It could be somebody in this room.
Well,
You never know. I just got my permits, and I'm going to get my garage built. So.
Well, funny you bring up permits because, Joe, you're talking about the American Dream. I mentioned Home Depot, and I can't remember the founder's name, who said...
Bernie Marcus.
Thank you. Has said it's almost impossible for people to succeed like that anymore because of how much stuff you have to go through from the government civil servants, which I am now starting to call our civil masters, because at every turn and step you have to obey and satisfy their requirements before you can take care of your own. Steve, how much did these permits cost you?
Actually, it was $160.
Yep.
We are adding a garage and mudroom and a 3-season/4-season porch.
And how many more permits are you going to have to get?
None. But
no plumbing, no electrical.
No, I'm all set. I'm not real. I don't have to do any plumbing. The heating's already covered because we're only running one duct into one room, and the electrical. They just need the electrician to sign the paperwork we already have.
No building inspectors?
They probably will come by. I mean, they did have, they had their forms. They said you need to fill these out. They really weren't that bad. They had some drawings, and you had to make sure that you explained how big your structures were going to be and what you were going to make them out of. And they were pretty nice. They were actually very nice. My wife had to go down and do this during the week because I wasn't there, but I had to fill in, what we were using, what kind of lumber. List of materials. I didn't need a full bill of materials. I just wanted to know, what are you using? What are you making? Primarily, they were concerned about what the roof was going to be made out of. What kind of lumber were we going to use, because they don't want the roof to collapse on the next owner, which is fine. It wasn't a big deal. It took me a couple minutes to write it all down. And they were very excited, and the foundation, of course. So we told them, we're doing 4 to 8 foot frost walls on all new existing structures with 16-inch footers, and they're like, awesome. That was it. We're done.
Yeah, and I contrast that with somebody who wanted to open up an art store up in Wolfboro. And after almost a year and $20,000 later, they had yet to open up that art store because they were still going through all of the permitting and variances and everything else. It's like the government almost didn't want them to start a free enterprise store.
On that note, real quick, for people who are paying attention to the IRS scandal, I was just reading yesterday, that there are still conservative groups on the list who have been waiting for 3 years to get their letter of intent or commitment, whatever it's called. They're still waiting. They are still waiting.
Yes.
And I have to
in the middle of the scandal.
Yeah, I have to say the better approach is to say we don't need no stinking government permission, and just say, you know what, we'll pay the damn taxes, and we won't register anything and won't send them any information except the total amount of money.
But the problem is, though, is that then the donors cannot take that off their taxes, so the government's got you twice over. And that's part of the deal, going back to, Joe, your original intent. And don't worry, Max, we're going to be talking to you in just a couple of minutes.
I wanted to say something about those permits, though. I'm not originally from New Hampshire. You can probably tell by I guess you guys say I have an accent.
Not really.
But in King County, Washington, people spent more time and more money getting permits to put a deck on their home or put a fence up, and the fence could only be so high, and if the fence had to be below 42 inches, and then there's an OSHA regulation saying that it has to be at least 44 inches, so you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If it's a home-based business and you've got one employee, the fence has to be this high, and so one federal agency is telling you have to do something that the county is telling you that you can't.
That's true of immigration in Arizona as well. They had one law that said you had to use E-Verify to verify employment, and then another law that said if you used E-Verify, you were discriminating.
Yes.
The whole nation's full of this crap.
Yeah, and that, it is kind of the running joke around here that every day you live, whether you like it or not, they could pin 4 or 5 laws that you've broken no matter what, and most of them carry federal penalties. We've become over-criminalized, over-lawyered, and that's kind of going back to, can we reach the American dream? Are we almost... you mentioned a couple of luminaries that are of the younger set, but is that more of the exception versus the rule? I know that we're talking here about expanding that pie, but has government and all of its good intentions, which tend to be soft handcuffs, have we so handcuffed the coming up generation that it's almost impossible to achieve what we have achieved. And they say, well, it's the economy, it's this, it's that. Very few people will point to government, except for conservatives, and say, you're making it too hard.
Yeah. It would be a problem if the rank and file, if the members of the people who live on Elm Street and Main Street do not understand that their government is taking their freedoms away from them. And as I relate that to a policy on the table, society abhors a vacuum. There's a vacuum of leadership in the White House, and there's a vacuum of leadership in the Congress. We have simple solutions to our problems. They are simple, but they are not easy. The first thing we have to do to unleash this thing is to create what some people are calling the grand bargain. And we cannot piecemeal our way out of this so that the free enterprise system can do what it needs to do. I look at the free enterprise system as a thoroughbred, and we have two big cement blocks holding this thoroughbred down. One is no fiscal policy in Congress, overregulation. Okay, we have overregulation because of the financial crisis that we had. People regulated, Frank Dodd, that kind of thing, regulated out of anger and out of fear. Regulation doesn't work unless it's there to protect people and have capital flow properly. If we have a grand bargain where we basically have a set rate to cut the expenses of government, say 2% a year over the next 5 to 6 years, get the corporate tax rate down to 25%, level the playing field, take away all the loopholes, and the other part I wanted to promote increasing the taxes, which may sound something to a lot of terrible conservatives, over $1 million, but we do need more revenue, and we're all Americans. But that got knocked down to $450,000, so that piece is already in place. And then the last thing we need to do, and Warren Buffett said it so clearly about a month ago, he said, when I negotiate a contract, he said, I don't do it out on the negotiating a labor contract. I don't do it out on the floor. What I do is I go into a meeting and we get all the parties together, have a special interest. We work out what's best for the employees and what's best for the company, and we come to a deal, and then we take it to the membership. We are trying to negotiate Medicare and Social Security reform on the campaign trail. It will never work because there's too much demagoguery that will not get to the solution. And what we need to do is we need to sit down in a committee room and have the parties come in there and saying, look, we have a math problem. We have a math problem in that the demographics, okay, we used to have 80 million baby boomers supporting 30 million retirees. Now we have 30 million workers supporting 80 million baby boomers. The math, I'm an investment real estate broker. I understand demographics. Math does not work. Okay, but if you sit there and say, well, it's not really a math problem because that's too insensitive, we need to take care of the people. Well, we can take care of the people we've made promises to, but we got to go back to the colleges and these young people and say, look, I would like to have Medicare and Social Security be for you, but if we're a bankrupt country, it's not going to be there. So we need to make some changes, work together so that you, when you retire, will have Social Security and Medicare.
And that's what I call the 100% of nothing situation. We keep promising these people that we're going to pay it out, and eventually the whole thing collapses.
Right.
Whether it's a union pension, whether it's the company that's going down the tubes because of union greed, or whether it's the country that's going down the tubes, you're milking the cow. You say we're going to have these fantastic benefits, and you're never going to vote to reduce your benefits. So, okay, do you want like 80% of something or 100% of nothing? Because you cannot have it all the way it's currently structured. It will collapse, and soon.
Yeah, and I think part of that has gone very quickly to the idea that the trust fund, if it ever existed, the money was always being pulled out of and being filled up with IOUs that could only be
There's a piece of paper in there that says IOU.
Yeah, which
the Social Security,
and these departments could only pay it back through higher taxes. But I am going to disagree with you on one part, because what works in the private sector of getting all of the quote-unquote stakeholders, and I've come to loathe that word, that works in the private sector because it's your money. I want them debating this on the campaign trail. I want them to debate this in their regular sessions in the House and in the Senate, because everything's out in the open. This whole gang of 8 on the immigration bill, where everything was negotiated in the back rooms where we couldn't see, when they brought in the special interests and the lobbyists to help write this bill. I'm sorry, that has done an injustice to the American people. The one thing that Granick Rock does stand for is an open and transparent government. And when you're doing the backroom deals, you cut the American people out. Now, the vast majority of them may not be paying attention. Well, that makes no difference whatsoever, because people like us do pay attention, and we call out our senators and our congressmen when we see them doing badly, and we can't do that when they're behind closed doors. But
no, that's a valid point, Skip, and that is the downside. But if you look at the Markey campaign down in Massachusetts this last time, I mean, he had no solutions to our problems. All he came out and said is that the Republican candidate was in favor of raising the retirement age and take away your benefits, and that really wasn't accurate. But when you have that kind of demagoguery, we don't solve the problem.
Well, you're correct, and that's what we talk about all the time. We're going to bribe you with your own money after we've taken our chunk out of it from taking it from you in the first place. But we're going to have you back to talk about this some more.
Love to come back.
And I appreciate you, Joe Mandolo, for coming in and talking to us. We can certainly say that we've just barely scratched the surface of this, and I really want to know how your efforts and outreach to the college community come out as you start bringing out questions. Oh, what do you think about this? And they go, what? And I would really like to do that. Now, normally I would love to be able to take a little bit of a break here if we could, and be able to switch subjects and go to Max Abramson, because you're here to talk to us about a court case that you're in. Another flip side of our ever-growing government, when perhaps things haven't gone so well, and now you have to go fight for your rights.
We could just talk for another 6 minutes and then go into the last segment.
I wonder if I could say something about the healthcare.
Yep. Oh, sure.
Sure.
Harry Brown, who was the Libertarian candidate for president a couple of times, would always make the point that, this was back in 96 and 2000, sorry about that. He would always say, before government got into healthcare with the FDA's 10 to 18-year-long approval process, the occupational licensing, healthcare mandates, obviously Obamacare mandates, all the state regulations, insurance mandates, 44 insurance mandates in New Hampshire. Healthcare used to be cheap before they started regulating it to death and taxing it to death, and 14 years of college to become an anesthesiologist, and you're left with hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans and a couple $100,000 a year for medical malpractice insurance. So you have the lawyers and regulators and politicians getting into it, driving the cost through the roof, and it's now, 15 or 16% of GDP or GNP is going just to healthcare costs, and you have politicians in Congress, and all they're talking about is how do you divide up the costs? Well, if the costs keep going up, if you pay for it through higher taxes, indirect taxes, lost wages, higher consumer prices, premiums, co-pays, the costs are still going up, and they still become unaffordable. As long as the costs continue to go up, then we're not going to be able to get healthcare coverage for...
And as long as government remains involved, the costs will go up if there's no competitive market anymore.
Yeah, there will be that phrase that we will hear more and more. We started to hear that at the beginning of the Tea Party movement. Well, I think we're going to start hearing about it more and more is, who is John Galt? Which I'm seeing some smiles around the table. They understand that's from Atlas Shrugged.
I'm trying to figure out how I can live on sufficiently less that I don't have to keep paying the government so much.
Right, and I know that, to your point, Max, that a lot of doctors have said, it's not worth the expense anymore. I'm going to retire. I'm not going to live as well as what I had hoped, but I can live more well, if I can use that phrase, than most people. So I'm just going to throw all of my folks out of their jobs. I'm going to retire, or I'm going to cut severely way back, or even as some have done, gone to concierge doctorhood, which you will pay me cash directly. I will have a much smaller number of people for patients, and I'm not dealing with insurance or anything else, and the government gets cut out, and they've basically gone John Galt. They've gone Dr. Galt.
There's a whole culture of people in Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and Southern California. They have no medical insurance. When they have anything dental work, if they have any medical attention they need, they go see their American doctor by going across the border in Mexico, get the work done, and pay cash, and then come back to the U.S. They're not going to deal with the insurance and the government regulations and everything else.
But that doesn't work if you're forced to buy the insurance or forced to pay a fine, even if you don't want it. And and Skip mentioned concierge, but there's also the walk-in clinics, which are a booming business, and those are effectively, if you had an unregulated market, the walk-in clinic plus a catastrophic insurance that covered the really big events would probably be the cheapest way to take care of your health. But the government doesn't want us to use those.
Yeah, health insurance has become something of the past. All we have now is health insurance is just another name for who's going to pay for the health care pie.
The point that I wanted to make, and we're running out of time, so I'm going to make it. Just going to jump right in there. As a father with a family, and there's 5 of us, I can tell you that my single biggest health care expense is insurance. The cost of the insurance is more probably than what we get out of it in the long run. Because most of my kids are healthy.
And you're young.
And we're all, I'll be 50 this year, but even still, we don't go to the doctor that much. When something happens, I stick a Band-Aid on it, you figure it out, maybe it goes away. You wait. You don't just jump. I have a neighbor, if anything happens, she goes to the doctor. Right. And these are the people who are driving up the costs. And this particular, that's the problem. The problem is regulation. In New Hampshire, we had the Shaheen bill, drove all the competition away. Now we have 3 providers pretty much, and we're going to be down to 1 pretty soon. And that's a monopoly, and it's expensive.
Well, I've got news for you, Steve. You're a target of the Obama administration and their regulation.
I knew that.
Well, yes, not just because of what we do here, but because the dirty secret of Obamacare is that they have to force the young and healthy that aren't paying big bucks right now, or even if they're covered of buying cheap insurance, they got to force these folks to pay an unreasonably large share in order to support.
On top of their really large student loan debt.
Yes, it's come to the point now with the Obama knots. HHS Secretary Sebelius has just kicked off a $150 million ad campaign to reach the young people who really don't need the kind of insurance she wants to put upon them, to the point where I just love this idea of how they're going to go to a bourbon festival or several bourbon festivals in Kentucky, because that's where the young people go. So first we'll get them drunk, and then we'll hook them onto Obamacare. What a country!
I was drinking, and I woke up, and I had Obamacare.
Wait a minute, Skip. A few centuries ago, in a land far, far away, if you went drinking, you would suddenly find the king's shilling in the bottom of your mug, and then when your hangover wore off, you'd be in a ship at sea going to war.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Shanghai,
Same thing.
Dragoon.
Yep.
But anyways, we've got music to Dragoon.
We have music, and I'm going to start the music right now. There you go. Here comes the music. Hello,
Where?
Music. Where are you? There it is. It's creeping in. See, we're supposed to talk over the music on our way out, and I guess I'll just keep talking until the music gets louder, and then we'll just break. I'll start turning microphones off.
You had us in suspense, Steve.
I did. Joe, thanks for coming. Max is going to be with us in the next half hour. We're going to do some seat shuffling, so everybody has the best quality audio equipment GrokTALK can provide here on GrokTALK, brought to you by GrokTALK.com. We'll be right back.
Let me get Eugene to answer, and let me just recite the question to you, Eugene. Is liberation and transformation inclusive of giving parents the freedom to choose their own school?
Well, let's just say I'm going to paraphrase a gentleman who came through the D.C. public school system a number of years ago, Wilson High School. His name was Warren Buffett. And he says, there's an easy way to solve the problem in schools like Washington, D.C., where he, spends a lot of time. And he says, we could create great public schools, but we'd have to almost abolish the private schools, force people to utilize their tax dollars in their best interest where their kids are going to school. So,
please join your host, Ken McClinton, on the Exceptional Conservative Show, right here at acnation.com at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Thursday, as he lays out his battle plans. and stand shoulder to shoulder in the fight to take back our country. Tuning in live is easy. Go to acnation.com and click on the play button in the Blog Talk Radio player. Be sure to visit the official webpage for show lineups and other details at theexceptionalconservativeshow.com.
Thanks for listening to Grok Talk, brought to you by GraniteGrok.com and syndicated weekly through AC Nation Radio. We'd like to make you an offer we hope you can't refuse. You have a local group or a nonprofit? We'd like to promote you right here on Grok Talk for free. You can send us your own 30-second audio promo, or if you send us the words, we'll make one for you, and then we'll play it, time permitting, during our podcast. If you'd like to take advantage of this opportunity, just email steve@GraniteGrok.com.
Grok Talk.
You're listening to AC Nation.
Grok Talk.
We're back with our new and different bumper music. My name is Steve McDonald. I'm here with Skip Murphy, Mike Rogers. Max Abramson has joined us in the guest chair, and Joe Mandola is still here hanging out to see how much fun it is to be part of this program.
ADD Blogger Bunch here.
That's right. I'm only going to turn mics up when I'm ready to. All right, you go ahead and talk, because I got to see if I can make this other thing work.
Max Abramson, I want to say thank you for coming in to talk with us here at Grok Talk. Now, you've got an interesting proposition that you want to talk about today. I'm not sure that proposition is perhaps the correct word, but you're bringing a government action to us that should concern us all. So why don't you give us a little bit of a background as Steve is trying to prep some audio to play that you brought in for us.
A couple of years ago, there was one of my housemates tried to convince me to go along with a party, and I had a bad feeling about it, and I said, no, I'm not in favor of allowing that at all. I'm the only person who throws parties in my house, and I only invite people who I know. And, of course, the next day, he and a friend of his started setting up this party anyway, and after a while, guests started arriving. And I had a talk with him, and they just seemed pretty oblivious to the whole problem. And I said, well, I'm going to send these people home. And after trying to get people to leave the house, a brawl broke out in the house, and this resulted in a self-defense trial. Witnesses admitted at the trial that there was a pile or huddle of people on the ground, and that there was a really violent brawl. And the police photos, of course, show broken glass and blood everywhere. 3 different witnesses at trial admitted that a woman came downstairs into the basement during this brawl with an upturned knife. She also had a beer bottle in her other hand. And according to police statements and witness statements, she was taking this knife and going at the throat of another woman. And I think that there was evidence of 3 different attempted murders and numerous felony assaults, criminal trespassing. And, of course, the police let all the criminals go, and they had, right there in their own police reports, admissions that the people there admitted that there was, in fact, a pretty bad fight, and that the homeowner had fired a warning shot into his backyard in order to break up the fight and get people out of his home. And they'd heard from multiple witnesses saying, yes, the gang leader charged at me and tried to wrestle the gun from me. And again, all of this came up again at trial. And so you have, New Hampshire's not a license to kill state. It's what some people call a license to not kill state. In other words, in states like Texas, you can shoot a trespasser. In some states, you have the right to use deadly force for almost any reason. The compromise in New Hampshire is they don't allow you to do that, but they allow you to use non-deadly force. The definition of deadly force is purposefully shooting someone or purposely shooting at someone when it's a firearm. non-deadly force is anything else. So if you, the general court responded to the Ward Bird case to specifically insist that if you simply draw your weapon or if you fire a weapon into the ground, if you fire away from people, you're using non-deadly force in response. And you can use non-deadly force in New Hampshire, in theory at least, to respond to almost anything. But if you're confronted with deadly force, you're allowed to use either deadly force or non-deadly force.
Real quick, those who are not familiar with New Hampshire and are listening from L's Place, Ward Bird was a gentleman who had a trespasser on his property who would not leave his property and was becoming, in his description, somewhat difficult. And he basically brandished his firearm. You can call that anywhere you want. Sometimes you could just say...
Did not fire it
he
at
did not
all.
fire it. You could just remove it from your holster, and he was charged...
And that's called brandishment.
And that's brandishing, and he was charged with a felony, and he spent Christmas away from his family in prison because of it. That's all he did. So that's what he means. So, yeah, that's changed.
And some would argue that that's not even non-deadly force, and some people would argue that how I responded was not even...
What if I'm just checking to see if my safety's on?
Exactly. That's not...
Which I just did.
Force of any kind.
So
make sure you do that off camera nowadays.
Oh, all right. So you should have seen it when Jim Coffey was here. I had a pile of weapons on the table. It was awesome, and they're all legal. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So we're going to see if we can play the 911 call.
Let me do
a
quick setup. One of the big questions at trial was this a life and death emergency, or as the law asks it, could a reasonable person perceive that there is an immediate danger? And the prosecutor attempted to argue on closing that after I'd taken the knife away from the woman with the knife, that everything had suddenly become
peaceful,
perfectly
sunshine,
safe,
rainbows,
despite testimony from all the other
Care
witnesses
Bears,
that was not the case.
Okay. All right.
So this is one woman who called 911 immediately after this, and I'd like the listeners to hear what I guess her interpretation of the fight was.
Let's see if this works. I clicked play. I'm waiting. Let's see what happens here.
New Hampshire 911, what is your emergency?
I'm in Seabrook. I need a cocktail right now. There's a fight.
Okay, where in Seabrook? You don't know where you are?
No, please do something.
Well, I'm giving that a shot right now, man, but it would really help if you could kind of try and describe where you are.
All right, I'm by Town Hall.
Town Hall?
General store.
General store?
No, please, God, there's blood everywhere, please.
There's blood everywhere?
Yeah,
okay.
Please. I'm begging you, please.
Okay, and this is in Seabrook, ma'am?
Yes.
You are in Seabrook?
All right, hold on.
Okay, stay on.
It's around the rotary. Go around the rotary. There's stuff.
Okay.
Go straight. It's the second left. It's a dead
Okay, but you said you're by the town hall and the general store?
Yeah.
Stay on the line while I transfer it. Man, what? There's guns?
There's gunfire.
Okay, stay on the line while I transfer to Seabrook Police, ma'am. Hi, this is 911, Agent 111. I've got a female cell caller on the line. I'm showing her on my phase 2 from her cell phone at the end of Charles Henry Way. She said that she's near the town hall and the general store. She said there's gunfire and blood everywhere. Caller's on the line.
Hello?
Hi.
Okay, where are you exactly?
Can I get... Okay, in response to that, she was the first material witness called at the trial, and the first thing she said is, of course, the same Jackie St. Hilaire, Jessica St. Hilaire, and their brother Robert Rubke. All three of them initially started their testimony with kind of like, fight, what fight? And this is 15 months after the fact, and of course, probably halfway through direct examination from the prosecutor, eventually they admit, okay, well, there was a fight, and there was some blood there. I cross-examined this witness, and she actually said, oh, there wasn't really a fight, just arguing, and then she changed her story, of course, and said, yeah, there's a fight. She ran upstairs to go get help. And she also said that, I never saw any blood on the ground, and yet you heard her say 2 or 3 times already on that 911 call, there's blood everywhere. The other thing that I thought was interesting, I didn't get this until a couple of months before trial. They're supposed to turn everything over in June of 2012. Prosecutor turned this over in December of 2012, months late. So it's too late to
have an expert go over and examine the audio and listen for the police response at the end. The other thing about this 911 call is it's 6 minutes and 37 seconds long, and the police are nowhere near the house by their own testimony by the end of this. They're not even on Charles Henry Way. By the end of this this call, it's going on, and when you sit there and listen to the trial and you start cross-examining the police and you start cross-examining witnesses, you start finding it's between the woman coming downstairs into the basement with the upturned knife and beer bottle threatening to kill people and almost stabbing Jessica in the throat. Between that point and the police finally getting into the house and getting into the basement was about 20 minutes, roughly. And there are no dash cams, there's no video, there's no audio recording by the police. Finally, after citizens' petition and a huge push in Seabrook, finally forced the police to accept dash cams, but I don't think they ever turned them on now. And there was overwhelming public outcry and overwhelming public support. People were thanking me and shaking my hand for doing that dash cam petition, but there was no dash cam video from any of this. And the biggest concern, the biggest issue was there a danger? And one of the things that the prosecutor did, there was evidence of 3 attempted murders, the woman coming down with a knife threatening to kill people, the gang leader trying to wrestle the gun from me, and a woman chasing down my housemate with an axe or a hatchet, screaming that she's going to kill him for calling the police. Now, the prosecutor argued that attempted murder number 3 happened too far after the discharge of the weapon, and therefore that should be kept out. That was kept out. And then she then goes up and argues that the police would have been there within a minute or two, and that he could have just called 911, and that it wasn't dangerous at all, meaning, I guess, that there wouldn't be any need to call 911 if it's really not dangerous, if that's what the prosecutor is arguing. And she's keeping all this evidence out, and then she goes on closing. There's no way to rebut the prosecutor on closing. The defense closes, and then the prosecutor closes. There's no way to rebut what she said. And she said, it's perfectly safe, and the police would have been there within a minute or two. And she's kept out evidence of this third act of the woman chasing down my housemate with a hatchet. Really psychotic, really extreme. And what was most amazing to me was this stack of papers is about 200 pages of criminal records on the very criminals who were in my home, gang members, career burglars who testified. This is also supposed to be turned over as soon as the indictments come out. There were 8 indictments for 1 gunshot. And the maximum sentence on that is 48 years in prison. And usually, I think this is probably the first time in New Hampshire history that anyone's been prosecuted and convicted for firing a warning shot in their backyard. Usually it's a $1,000 fine for unauthorized use of firearms if you fire around in a suburban area. It's certainly an irresponsible act if you do it for no reason. And I certainly wouldn't advise anyone to do it unless it's really a life and death emergency. It's not a responsible use of firearms, but it's certainly not a felony. It's never been a felony. And usually this charge that they went after Ward Bird with, and also the man in Farmington, Dennis Fleming, who fired around into his backyard to prevent a burglar from getting away. Usually reckless conduct is accompanied by attempted murder, armed robbery, felony criminal threatening, murder, robbing a bank, shooting up a liquor store, shooting up occupied buildings or passing vehicles. It's a really extreme danger. It's just a hair under attempted murder. That's what it's usually used for. It's never been used for, and I don't think anyone in New Hampshire history has ever been convicted for. I don't think anyone's even been charged for, other than Dennis Fleming, for firing around into their backyard. Especially not when all the police and all the witnesses have come forward and said, yeah, he did this to break up a fight and get people out of his house.
Okay, maybe I just want to ask a couple questions. You've presented what has happened. We've heard the 911 call, and now you've talked about some of the legalities. So, and obviously you were trying to break up a fight, trying to get people's attention, couldn't find any other way to get people's attention after you had verbally told them to leave your house. What has been unspoken, so I guess I just want to make it clear for the listeners. I take it that you were arrested, you were indicted, you went through a trial, and is all of that true? at this point? And if so, where does this stand at this point? Have you been through the trial? What was the verdict?
I've been through the trial. I filed a motion at halftime to get 3 of the charges dismissed for a complete lack of evidence. The jury threw out 4 more indictments, and I even have a copy of some of the indictments here. But the jury threw out 4 more because of obviously lack of evidence at the end of the trial. But they picked this one unusual one that doesn't even specify a person. You're free to take a look at it, but the case is on appeal, and it's on appeal because the evidence is so overwhelmingly in favor of self-defense that you have multiple deadly force provocations and a homeowner responding with a single non-deadly force response. Normally, if it's deadly force provocation, you're lawfully allowed to use deadly force. If it's non-deadly force, trespassing, simple assault, fighting, something minor, you're allowed to use non-deadly force to respond to a non-deadly force response. But the case is on appeal, and one of the reasons, or one of the main reasons, is that the evidence was just so overwhelmingly in my favor. When you go through the elements, witnesses are denying the elements, and when you go through the defenses, nearly all of the material witnesses and the police photos, and the 911 call overwhelmingly support all of the, or some of the defenses. Each of the witnesses supports at least some of the defenses. And so there's no way that any rational juror, if they really had understood the law, if they'd really understood the jury instructions, and if they'd really followed them, that they could have convicted.
So at this point, you're still looking to have this one single indictment thrown out at this point.
Or a conviction, felony conviction.
Which means that you would be unable to own any firearms in the future.
Right.
You have a whole lot of other things that are taken away from you as far as your rights are concerned. And I know you are of the libertarian persuasion politically, and a lot of that is extremely important to you. So I can understand why you're fighting to get this tossed.
Well, no, there's a provision in law that says if you've been convicted of a felony, you cannot become a candidate for office. However, the way that the timing worked out, and I was able to run as a libertarian candidate for Rockingham County Attorney. So I saw, and I think a lot of other newspaper readers saw, that there was an awful lot of evidence that this was just strictly political, that this was retaliation coming from the county attorney's office.
The real motive.
And I've had over 30 people from around town and around the area come up to me and say, this was just pure retaliation from the police department, right? And I of course say yes. I've had journalists, people who've lived in Seabrook their whole lives, people who've lived in the area their whole lives, people who are close to the police department. They said, that this is just retaliation, right?
Yes.
Could you even say that their late arrival was perhaps because you were a candidate?
Well, I wasn't a candidate at that time. I was a member of the budget committee, asking an awful lot of questions about why is it that this police department has 3 times the budget of any other town our size? Why are we getting so many complaints from people that the police aren't showing up and responding to calls for service? Why do we have so many complaints about stealing from crime scenes? The gun range scandal was one of the biggest scandals in town history. The Seabrook police officers, several of them, I think 6 or 8 of them, were caught stealing money from the gun range fund, which was money that was supposed to go to the town general fund. So they were literally stealing from the taxpayers, falling asleep on detail. I think one officer was caught on either film or video.
I think we can see why they don't want dash cams.
Having relations with a drug addict in the back of their car. They dropped charges in a DWI case in exchange for inappropriately mentionable sexual favors
of which
from a
there
woman.
Is another case, and I wanted to just say for those who aren't from New Hampshire and aren't politically active and aren't familiar with this, we had Ed Nail on, of course, and we talk about police chiefs a lot, and there's a lot of corruption. They start their little own fiefdoms, and then they have assistance from their officers, depending on how many there are, and this goes on everywhere. The new London police chief just resigned because he had asked for sexual favors from a Colby Sawyer College student in exchange for dropping the charges against her. And, of course, he resigned with full pension, which is $53,000 a year, and the AG has an investigation that's ongoing, and they're going to release their results of that investigation in a couple weeks, and anybody who's familiar with New Hampshire knows that that's not going to amount to anything. But my question was, you have a police chief, or an example like Seabrook, where you have a guy who's been a police chief, he's been in the force for 27 years. Mm-hmm. This is not the first time he did this. And even though only 3 or 4 more victims came forward, Colby Sawyer College is right there. There are young women drinking and have been for decades. There are probably hundreds of victims that we'll never know about, and they'll never come forward because they're too embarrassed.
The toughest call I've ever had to take as an elected official was a phone call from a constituent, one of 2 who I've heard from, who said that they were raped by Seabrook cops. And this 45-minute phone call, and this came up at trial, was extremely difficult for me personally, because how do you convince someone to come forward when they know that even if they come forward, there are not going to be any charges against the officer? If there are charges, they'll be thrown out, and she's going to face retaliation, harassment, and maybe even criminal retaliation. There was another scandal in Seabrook a few years ago where a Seabrook cop wasn't fired. He had taken 86 topless photos of a 15-year-old girl against her will, and when he realized they were onto him, he double exposed the films, trying to erase it, but you just saw you see the 2 images back in the days when they had film. It didn't delete it like they do with a digital camera. Another one was Mark Preston.
He didn't understand what a match was for.
That's awful.
No, the film...
Film used to be flammable.
Film was very flammable. I mean, if he's doing double exposures to erase an image, I mean, there's obviously better ways
keep in mind, this is a police officer who's taking photos of a 15-year-old girl. His judgment is clearly flawed to begin with.
Yeah, well, I know.
Officer Hersey, who testified at the trial, had been caught when he was a Seabrook firefighter. They got rid of him pretty quick.
Yeah.
He was caught stealing money from the Toy Bank Fund at Christmas time.
I mean, I don't mean to make light of it, but, we tend to sometimes here at Granite Rock and GrokTALk respond with a little bit of snark. And that's why, if you are that stupid to get caught that way, that you don't even know what a match is.
These are verbal face palms, just so you know. It's like,
yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've got lots of good small-town police chiefs around New Hampshire, including where I live in Hollis. But, there's enough of these stories to worry people, and the bad ones are very difficult to weed out. But I got to ask you this. Why not go the alternate route of the best defense is a good offense and hire yourself a lawyer that's going to sue the police department for not being seconds away when it mattered?
The problem,
and allowing your house to be defiled by these people when you called for help.
And that's the problem that we face, is that even though a lot of people will say, well, especially those in government, who have often said, like with environmental stuff, with the Water Sustainability Commission or the Sustainable Communities Environment, where DES or somebody else is some other environmental group says, well, we'll craft this law. Constitutionality, we don't have to worry about that. We'll let the courts decide that, which means somebody's got to bring suit, which means somebody's got to spend money, Mike, to be able to go after the justice. And not
people
everybody's
have to remember that the court system is part of the government.
Yeah, and if you've got to pay to play
$300,000 to get to the U.S. Supreme Court, Warren versus District of Columbia, 1977 case where the U.S. Supreme Court said, yeah, hey, we're sorry, but these women who were, they called the police did show up, knocked on the door, and then took off. They were called again, and because the police did not show up and did not follow through, 3 people, 2 women and a man, were horribly physically and sexually abused, raped, forced to do all kinds of terrible things, and were really horribly traumatized. And most people think that the police have some lawful or contractual duty to respond. If they don't respond, they don't respond.
Yeah, and to bring suit would mean that I have to pay some lawyer, $5,000 right off the bat as a retainer, and on an hourly basis just to bring my suit to prove that my government has done me wrong. Yes, you can go to your elected officials, but as you've seen, and I'm following up on an issue right now where people in my local government none of them have responded to my email. I mean, what do I have to do? Oh, I know, right to know request. I will just blither them in paperwork. But if they don't respond, what is my only recourse? I have to hire a lawyer at my expense, my time, and my effort to sue the government that's not being responsive to me. It's a bad situation to
Plus
be
the
in.
$225 filing fee. And it would have been $80,000 to defend against 8 indictments, even with overwhelming evidence in my favor. A lot of jurors don't pay attention to the evidence. A lot of them go in with a presumption of guilt. Statistically, 80% of jurors have their mind made up by the end of opening arguments. They don't look at the evidence. Some of them don't do their job. Some of them go in with a chip on their shoulder. If they just decide they don't like you, they don't care what the evidence is. And they don't listen to jury instructions. We had 19 pages of jury instructions. It took weeks to get through all the case law and all the statutes that were relevant to that case. And the jury doesn't hear about it to the end of the trial after closing arguments. They're not going to follow jury instructions. New Hampshire juries are famous for not following jury instructions.
Well, if I had to listen and memorize 19 pages of case law, and just the names and the dates and all of that stuff without oh, man.
And, of course, this goes back to human nature, which we started the program with. You have to include that as a factor in any litigation, obviously, not just the process of do I do it. Look at the goofballs that I'm dealing with that aren't responsive to me. I now have to go through a New Hampshire court system, which is also infamous for not being the best in the world, and then now a jury system, which is also apparently infamous for not really paying attention. So how do you get justice?
And if you want to claim self-defense or any defense, anything under RSA 627, I give out copies of these for people to get the law. I've given out probably 100 copies of those. You have to write up a notice of defenses. Has to be in the proper format. You have to send a copy to the other side. It has to go in 45 days before the original trial date. And if you miss any of it, you can't get in any evidence of self-defense, and you can't claim self-defense. Anyone's welcome to have these. I've got probably 100 more copies at home. But you have to write those up. You have to send it in, and you have to hope that the witnesses, if there are any, who will support those defenses, defense of others, competing harms, defense of premises, that they will show up and that they will remember what they told the police and remember what they wrote in their statements, if they even made any statements. And sometimes people just don't show up at trial. But this is kind of the hammer. This is the 200 pages of criminal records. When you get attacked, whether it's in your home or out and about, the jury is never going to hear about the criminal records of the people who attacked you. The 25 or 30 assault and battery convictions and outstanding warrants, the 2 attempted murder convictions, the assault to kill, numerous breaking and entering, felony assaults, assault with a dangerous weapon, larceny, you name it. Unless it's a crime of dishonesty and that witness shows up, you can bring up theft, but I wasn't able to bring in cruelty to animals, statutory rape, attempted murder. These things didn't get in. The jury never heard about the violent criminal history of these people.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And the prosecutor is not going to bring, gang leaders like Paris Cormier in to testify and say, "Oh no, I didn't try to pull the gun from him. I wasn't even there." And when you see some of these, they did bring in one career criminal named Robert Rubke, who's turns out is a professional home burglar, and I wrote down a list of some of the criminal convictions, and they just go on and on and on and on. And some of these were null processed, witness threatening and assault and battery on a household member. They were null processed, meaning that they threw the charges out for whatever reason.
I really do hope that you don't have the same housemates that you did who invited these folks in for the party.
No, I absolutely did not. And actually, the housemate who threw the party, it was like pulling teeth, trying to get the guy to show up. He was dodging the deputies, dodging process servers. He'd been subpoenaed under threat of jail, and he still wouldn't show up, and finally just happened to show up one day at the very end of the trial, right before closing arguments, and I was able to get him up on the witness stand.
Wow. Wow is wow. Well, Max, thank you for coming and sharing your story with us so that we can all be like, wow. I mean, that was an awesome segment. Joe, thanks for coming in. Mike, of course, as always, for driving all the way up here to be our co-host and Skip. My name's Steve McDonald. This is Grok Talk, brought to you by GraniteGrok.com. We'll be back next week with more guests and more fun, I hope. I won't be here, but somebody
will be.
Okay. We'll see you then.
And the most fun you can have on a Saturday morning.
That's right. Or any other morning, whenever you listen to it.
You're listening to AC Nation.